Prologue. Shadows upon marble and gold. Let us begin not with conquest, but with whisper, one that rustles through the olive groves of Macedon and the marble halls of Persia. Tonight, we summon Alexander, the boy king who became storm, sweeping across continents with vision, fire, and myth at his heels. His world was fractured, his ambition unrelenting, and in tracing his path, from Tudor's Iskurul to battlefield thunder, we seek not just glory, but insight into power, legacy, and the fragile thread between greatness and ruin. Before us, dear scholars and stalwart adventurers, the lamp of history burns low, casting long, flickering shadows across the time-worn tapestries of Macedon and Persia. Let us assemble, then, in this mahogany-clad study. Above, the painted faces of kings and queens peer anxiously as the winds of antiquity sigh at the leaded windows. Outside, the world is fractured, as befitted the Hellenes themselves, city-states ever at odds yet joined by the fragile strands of language and legend. But within these walls, by the light of reason and the fire of imagination, we shall resurrect the bold spectre of Alexander, the son of the lion and the queen, whose ambition shook the pillars of East and West alike. With every conquered city, with every dashed enemy, Alexander etched his name deeper into the slate of eternity. Hero, tyrant, philosopher, and, some aver, living god. And it is here, amidst both fact and legend, that we must draw our narrative, balancing upon the knife's edge between the historian's exactitude and the storyteller's irresistible urge to fan each detail into life. Let the tale begin, at once the pulsing artery of Hellenic culture and the lifeblood of Persian dreams, so that, in hearing it anew, we might discern in the tumult of the past map for our own uncertain age. Origins of kings, philosophers, and the crucible of Macedon. The 4th century before Christ was powder keg built low under the sun, the kindling of old hatreds and shifting alliances heaped all about. Greece, that brooding mosaic of polis, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, was beset by malaise after the Peloponnesian War. Once beacon, now kaleidoscope of battered independence, its proud cities jostled and bellowed beneath the encroaching shadow of Macedon. Inter Philip II, man forged in the fires of Thebes, hardened by both captivity and canny appreciation of Athenian wit and Theban discipline. While city after city flailed hopelessly in internecine squabbling, Philip reimagined the Macedonian state, blending raw iron and Hellenic learning, and building a new form of power, one less beholden to democracy's tempers and more to the pulse of the king. From this cauldron was cast Alexander, the scion of Philip and Olympias. Tales proliferate. Philip's dream of sealing the womb of Olympias with lion's seal, the echoing prophecy that the child thus born would be bold as lion itself. The young Alexander's world was blur of martial drills, Homeric verses, and the crackle of debate with teachers both stern and wise. Legend records that, as boy, Alexander tamed the indomitable steed Bucephalus, prodigy's feat, which provoked Philip to murmur, "Macedonia is too small for you, my son." And then, transformation. Philip, determined to pour Greek wisdom into Macedonian veins, summoned Aristotle, the peripatetic genius of Stagira, to tutor his son, not merely in arms but in the architecture of the mind. At Mysia, under cool colonnades and amidst the whispering groves, Aristotle sowed seeds of logic, philosophy, poetry, and the natural sciences within the prince and his companions. If ever there was a philosopher king in the making, it was Alexander in this sacred academy, learning that to rule well is to know well, and to know well is to wonder always. So, emerges the paradox of Alexander's legacy. Warlord schooled in the rhetoric of moderation and justice, yet one who would, in time, cast himself as both heroic Achilles and wrathful Zeus. The world, he learned, is chessboard, and the king player with unique privileges. Yet for all Aristotle's restraint, it was Homer's Iliad that he clasped closest to his heart, and in whose shadow his dreams of conquest were cast. Campaigns, the hammer and the loom, the march to empire. What vision it must have been, that morning in 336 BCE, when Alexander, crowned at 20, assumed the kingship following Philip's bloody assassination. The new king inherited not merely the throne, but model army, disciplined, professional, and molded by Philip's tireless reforms. Here was the Macedonian phalanx, deep, bristling ranks of pikemen bearing the Tsar Isa, an 18-foot dread spear, its points glinting beneath helms of bronze and ambition. Flanking these men were the thunderous ranks of companion cavalry, the Hetairoi, the hammer to the phalanx's unbreakable anvil. The stage 4 drama was set, Greece cowed, Persia simmering. Darius III, king of kings, presided in Susa over the Achaemenid Empire, an imperial colossus spanning deserts, rivers, and the unbowed will of 1,000 peoples. Yet the empire, remarkable for its satrapal bureaucracy and cultural tolerance, was beset by familiar malaise, corruption, faction, and restive provinces. The old lion was vulnerable. The western gates, Granicus and the shattering of Asia, 334 BCE. So begins Alexander's Odyssey, an armada of triremes crossing the Hellespont, Alexander casting a spear upon Asian shores to claim his prize by right of conquest. There, on the banks of the Granicus River, the young king's genius flashed brilliantly for the first time, the phalanx locked in the muddy waters, while Alexander, resplendent in lion helm, led the companion cavalry through the ford, smashing the Persian front. Disgrace the Hellespont should I fear the Granicus? He retorted to Parmenions' pleas for caution, a flourish worthy of Homeric song. Victory begot victory. The satraps lay dead, Greek mercenaries chained. Alexander sent 300 sets of Persian armor to Athens, inscribed to Athena as spoils from the barbarians of Asia, a pointed gesture, both pan-Hellenic and personal. Isis and Tyre, the theater of kings, 333 BCE. South, ever south. At Isis, on narrow ground straightened by the sea and the mountains, Alexander met Darius III for the first time. Here unfolded a spectacle of cunning and nerve. The Macedonian right stretched, the phalanx thrust across a chill river, while Alexander, now Achilles incarnate, led a charge for Darius himself. Panic spread through the Persian lines, Darius' golden chariot fleeing in dust and ignominy. Tyre, jewel of the Mediterranean, resisted behind its insular walls. Alexander replied not with surrender but with artifice, building a kilometer-long mole to breach the city's isolation. 7 months the siege endured, a contest of engines and will. At last, Tyre fell, Alexander's fury, 7,000 slain, 30,000 enslaved, became legend. Yet the conqueror paused also for pageantry and promise. Temples respected, religious rites observed, hints of the king's policy of conciliation and display. Pharaoh's son and the Gordian knot, Egypt and destiny, 331 BCE. In Egypt, resistance crumbled into adulation. Alexander was declared pharaoh, son of Ra. And Eti the oasis of Siwa was proclaimed by the oracle as the son of Zeus Ammon. Here again myth thickened around history, the king now touched by divinity, a man-wolf among mortals. In founding Alexandria, he sowed a seed that would yield a city famed for its wisdom and cosmopolitan grandeur. Earlier, at Egordium, he confronted the famed knot, symbol of Eastern power and prophecy. Whether by sword or wit, Alexander claimed the riddle's mastery. It matters little how the knot is unfastened, a maxim as apt for tangled politics as for commerce. Gaugamela and the eclipse of empire, 331 BCE. The climactic struggle came on the plains of Gaugamela. Darius with his host, chariots gleaming and elephants bellowing, marshaled for a confrontation of worlds. Here, Alexander's tactics elevated him to the pantheon of generals. The phalanx advanced relentlessly while the cavalry, in wheeling wedge, pierced the heart of the Persian line. Darius again fled, his empire buckled. Soon, Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, cities of myth and gold, lay open before Macedon. To the edges of earth, Bactria, India, and the weariness of men. Eastward the king pressed, an Odyssean figure haunted by the illimitable. In the highlands of Bactria and Sogdiana, resistance was fierce. Local nobles retreated to Ares upon the cliffs. Eti the Sogdian rock, Alexander's men, in a feat as much bravado as brilliance, scaled the unscalable, rewarded not with plunder but with the hand of Roxana, princess of Bactria. It was symbolic, a marriage of Hellenic and Persian destinies. In India, the whirligig of fate turned savage. Eti the Hydasps, Alexander met King Porus, fierce, proud, astride his war elephants. Rain lashed the battlefield, but through a surfeit of stratagems and perseverance, the Macedonians prevailed. Porus, though defeated, gained Alexander's admiration, and his kingdom, restored to him. But here, on the banks of the Hyphasis, Alexander's men at last revolted, exhausted by years of marching into the unknown. Mutiny and weariness defeated the conqueror as no foe could. Death dogged the retreat through Gedrosia's desert waste. Thirst and sun claimed thousands. Finally, Alexander returned to Babylon, crowned in glory but dogged by whisperings, intrigues, and a fever that would fell him within the year. The principles of command, strategy as high art. It was not only the sword that won. It was the mind. Alexander's genius lay in combined arms warfare. Infantry, cavalry, archers, and siegecraft all molded into a seamless whole. The phalanx hammered as an anvil, the cavalry struck as a hammer. His speed, mercurial, unpredictable, rendered precise supply lines a secondary concern. Strike fast, strike where you are least expected. His use of psychological warfare was consummate. Cities that submitted were spared, those that resisted, destroyed with Homeric ferocity. His ability to adapt, at the Tyre, at the Gamila, at the Hydaspes, demonstrated a willingness to discard the prescripts of his own culture in favor of results. Yet, for all this, he strove for more than victory. He encouraged scholars to accompany his marches, collecting botanical, zoological, and ethnographical data. His campaigns mapped mountains, measured rivers, and infiltrated ideas as well as legions. Legacy, the loom of Hellenism, the shattering of empire. Alexander fell in Babylon, and the world, momentarily united by force, by law, by myth, splintered. The wars of the Diadochi, grim and bloody, would pit general against general in a contest even the gods might have condemned for its fratricidal excess. Out of chaos, a new order emerged. The dominions of Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Asia, Lysimachus in Thrace, and Cassander in Macedon. Perhaps nothing so starkly reveals the paradox of greatness. When man's will could conquer in a decade, but no will suffice to keep the whole stitched once the tailor had departed. Yet, if empires perished, cultures endured. The Hellenistic world, stretching from Alexandria to Ai Khanum, breathed Greek thought into the lungs of Asia, Africa, and beyond. The Koine dialect became the language of commerce and poetry. The gymnasium and theater rose alongside Zoroastrian fire temples. The syncretic gods of Egypt and Persia found new forms alongside Aphrodite and Apollo. In art, philosophy, and political forms, a creative fusion flourished, built as much on borrowing as on innovation. Cities like Alexandria and Antioch became crucibles where the sciences and philosophies mingled, laying arteries that would pulse for centuries, through Augustine, through Avicenna, through the very arteries of Rome itself. Legends, myths, and the romance of empire. Alexander's name spun itself into legend not only among Greeks, but among Persians, Jews, Muslims, and a score of other cultures. Tales abounded: the Gordian knot, the descent into the ocean by diving bell, the ascent to the heavens on the backs of griffins, the construction of the gates to imprison the tribes of Gog and Magog beyond the world of man. In the East, he became Dhu al-Qarnayn of the Quran. In Persian poetry, he was both hero and vanquisher. Medieval romances embroidered his deeds, casting him as a seeker of truth, a philosopher king, even a Christian knight or Muslim saint. Such is the nature of waterfalls, after all. When the river of memory strikes the rocks of legend, it splits anew and courses through every valley, changing all in its path. Of governance, integration, and Hellenization. Beneath the legends, there are sober facts of rule. Alexander's genius arguably peaked not in battle, but in his efforts at the integration. He wore Persian dress, organized mass marriages at the Susa, and appointed natives to positions of authority, much to the horror of many Macedonian loyalists. Attempts at the new cosmopolis, a world in which Greeks, Persians, Egyptians, and Indians joined under one law, left a legacy both rich and contradictory. The Greeks who ruled in Alexandria and Antioch may have spoken a shared tongue, but they did not always share sympathies. The old city-states decayed, replaced by royal dynasties. His successors twisted the thread yet further. The Ptolemies, in particular, forged a cult of Serapis, a god both Egyptian and Hellenic, as the soul of multicultural Alexandria. The Grand Library of Alexandria, founded in echoes of Aristotle's Lyceum, became the beacon of learning for centuries. And in India, too, Alexander's aftershocks catalyzed change. The Mauryan dynasty, under Chandragupta, emerged filled with both ideas and ambitions gleaned from the Greeks, with far-reaching impact. The modern echo, Rome, that final inheritor of Hellenic ambition, walked in Alexander's footsteps deliberately. Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Augustus all gazed with yearning on the Macedonians' exploits. The Roman Empire that followed was, in so many ways, a child of the Hellenistic world, imitating its art, philosophy, and sense of destiny. Epilogue. Reflections by Candlelight. So we return, as must always the traveler, to the present hour. The embers are low in our study now. The whispers of history have faded, and the wind beyond the oak-paneled walls has quieted. Yet Alexander's face lingers, as elusive as the flicker of a flame sheltered from the wind. What, then, is